All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm Alec Bogdanoff. I'm the principal in charge on this project here at Brazaga. Alongside, we have AECOM, who has been the technical lead on this, and of course, our client, the South Florida Regional Planning Council. So we're really excited to uh, have you all today. I want to thank the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council and the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council for being our host today. And really wanted to, before we begin, we're going to let both of them give a little bit of background on the resilience work they're doing, since our regional planning councils are doing such amazing resilience work across the state. This project is funded by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So we would like to, of course, thank them. And last but not least, this meeting is being recorded. So this is just your notice that this meeting is being recorded. All right. So with that, I'm going to first pass it over to Allison with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council to give you guys a little bit about what they are doing in the Tampa Bay area. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Alec. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Prater. I'm the Disaster Recovery Grants Coordinator for the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of our many resiliency projects today. So just so you guys know, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council extends from Citrus County in the north down to Manatee County in the south. We have 23 municipalities that we serve with 13 gubernatorial appointees and 3 ex officios. We also do sometimes include Sarasota County on our resiliency coalition, so that's important to note too. We've been working on convening the region since 1962, and our resiliency coalition came up just in the past couple of years. It's been one of the forefronts of our efforts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are the 3 areas I'd like to talk about really briefly. First off, for those of you who don't know, we have our Regional Resiliency Summit coming up in May. It's May 14th and 15th at the Palmetto Marriott Resort. Registration's now open if anyone would like to attend. We usually have 300 to 400 local professionals, public, private, and nonprofit who are all kind of working in that resiliency space. So it's a really great opportunity. Additionally, I'd like to talk to you about 2 of our projects that kind of define resilience in our region. Firstly, Project Phoenix. If you would, next slide, please. Thank you. So Project Phoenix is one of my personal favorite projects. It's a disaster recovery project aimed at increasing small business economic resilience in the region. So first and foremost, Project Phoenix is a video. We create a hurricane simulation video that includes real stories of small business recovery. We've done 3 iterations of this project, so you may have seen our 2020 iteration with the Mexico beach stories around Hurricane Michael. But our newest video is going to be released upcoming soon, should be ready any day now, and it's about the small business recovery in the Tampa Bay region from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. We have 6 different tabletop exercises, 1 for each county in our region, and we use this video to train small businesses on preparedness and help improve their collaboration and coordination with emergency management professionals. So it's a really great opportunity to kind of bring together those traditionally siloed areas of economic development and emergency management and have them collaborate so that our region can recover faster in the face of a worst case scenario Category 5 hurricane event. If you're interested, you can go to tbrpc.org/Phoenix, and there's a link to register and more information about this project. Secondly, I wanted to talk to you guys about our Tampa Bay Coastal Master Plan. This project is funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, and it is a 4-year-long project that we're working on. We modeled it after Louisiana's Coastal Master Plan that they did after Hurricane Katrina. Essentially, what we'd like to do is we'd like to identify and assess flood vulnerable communities in our region and coordinate a suite of restoration and non-structural flood reduction projects to support adaptation and resilience in those areas. The Tampa Bay Coastal Master Plan is really centered around community engagement. And we've got a couple of different working groups if anyone would like to join. We have one for our community outreach working group and then also our technical assistance working group, which will kind of help go through those flood reduction projects and sort and prioritize them so that we can make sure that we advertise the best adaptation and support the best adaptation for those vulnerable areas in our community. So thank you all so much. We appreciate it. If you have any questions about any of these resilience efforts at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, you can reach out to myself. It's just Allison with 1L at tbrpc.org.
Thank you so much. And now we'll pass it to Rebecca.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Harp. I am the Executive Director with the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council. You can go to the next slide. Our counties span from Charlotte, Collier, Glades, Hendry, Lee, and Sarasota counties. Our team consists of myself and Esma Oda, our Deputy Director, Portfolio Manager, and LAPC Coordinator. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Esma to go over our regional resiliency projects and what we're planning for the future.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a great overview and overview of our current resiliency efforts across our 6-county footprint. We're currently in the second phase of our resiliency collaborative. The first phase was a lot of stakeholder engagement and identifying needs across the region, and implementing stakeholder meetings and providing best practices and technical assistance with our current community partners, institutes of higher education, and other cross-sector collaborations that we've found to be very helpful for our region. We're currently in our second phase, and we're working on a resiliency hub. We are also currently planning for our second webinar series that is scheduled for March 25th and will include a presentation from the Water Institute as well as the Chief Officer of Resiliency for the City of Jacksonville, which will also cover compound flooding modeling efforts, and things that the city is working on to increase their resiliency. We also hosted our resiliency forum in October in Charlotte County, and it was a very successful turnout. We discussed brownfields, the Water Management District, as well as the University of Florida IFAS and our trademark regional brand, Southwest Florida Fresh, and how our projects collectively improve and contribute to increasing resilience in our region. And our key priorities on the right side of the slide are identifying gaps and understanding where our counties and cities are in terms of resiliency, if they are in the vulnerability assessment stage or moving towards adaptation plans. And creating the Resiliency Hub website will feature 6 of our of locations within our region that'll highlight potential impacts to flooding and sea level rise. And through these resiliency webinars, we identify barriers to coordination and how we can continue to be a coordinator for state and federal resources. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to Rebecca or myself. And if you're interested in participating or collaborating, please also feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're really glad that our Regional Planning Council partners were able to give you all a little bit of a background of the great resilience work they are working on. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the BCA tool. I'm going to give a bit of an introduction and then pass it to Annie, who's going to give you guys a bit about the stakeholder engagement process and then actually walk you through the tool as well. And we'll have time for question and answer at the end as well. So again, I'm Alec Bogdanoff. Alongside me at Brazaga, I have Sheree and Grace. At AECOM, we have Annie, who's been the technical lead, and has Olivia and Anne supporting her. And then from the South Florida Regional Planning Council, we've been working closely with Randy and Marion as well. So a little bit about what we want to discuss with you today. The first is background on the tool and how engagement like this has shaped the tool and its development. Again, we're going to walk you through the current version of the BCA tool. And we're going to give you guys a bit of information about the feedback we'd like to hear from you. So again, this is an expanded tool. It's still in draft form. We want to get some really good feedback so we can finalize it and make this something that is just a good community asset. And then we'll discuss next steps. We'll talk about office hours and a request for super users. So you'll hear that phrase a few times. Those are some folks we want to be able to dive in deep with the tool with us and give us some really detailed feedback. So if that's something that sounds exciting to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to have some more super users. So this week we've been holding regional stakeholder workshops. We will be holding office hours later in the month, and towards the end of the presentation, we'll give you those specific dates and some links to register for them if you'd like to join us. And then we're collecting all of the stakeholder feedback by early April so that we can deliver a final tool by April 17th. We will host 2 statewide trainings in May for the tool. So those will be statewide trainings where we'll, again, walk through the tool, how to use it, give a little bit more detail on the information you need to actually produce an outcome from the BCA tool. We'll complete our engagements, and then this is a DEP funded project, so we'll have all of our deliverables to DEP by June. A quick overview of the resilience tool. So this tool is designed to help communities evaluate, compare, and prioritize resilience infrastructure projects. So 2 things. That looks at a broad range of solutions, gray, green, and hybrid. So we do look at nature-based solutions. It is important to note that this is a screening level analysis. This tool is designed to help in the decision-making process. It is not designed to replace detailed technical BCA that might be required as part of, say, a FEMA grant. You will still need to use that FEMA BCA tool, do that analysis. What it can help, however, is when a grant might ask for the cost effectiveness, or is this the most cost effective solution, which a lot of us have seen that question on a grant, and there's not necessarily a methodological way of showing that. This tool can actually help you evaluate a couple different infrastructure projects to solve a flooding issue, for example, and in the end be able to say, yes, we picked the most cost-effective solution because it has the highest benefit. Or we have a community scorecard and some other metrics that look at kind of non specific like loss numbers. And maybe you don't necessarily pick the highest BCA, you pick the second highest because it has a lot more ecosystem benefits. Being able to have that conversation as part of the grant process or even the infrastructure decision-making process is really important. And ultimately, this will be a consistent, transparent, and repeatable method. So a BCA will really look at the cost effectiveness of a project, looking at the anticipated costs. Annie will walk you through. We actually have a costing tool built in, and the expected benefits that may accrue from a project over a specific time. I will point out, obviously, if you have better cost estimates than what we can provide in this tool, you should use those. The primary goals of the tool are to, 1, again, standardize benefit cost evaluation across regions and projects, to support early stage planning, to allow customization and flexibility through an Excel-based tool. This team has hopes and aspirations to make it more than an Excel-based tool. Right now, this is, though, the tool we've developed. And then we want to provide defensible data-driven outputs to support proposals and decision-making. Lastly, we incorporate community, environmental, and economic benefits. So one of the things, this isn't just an avoided damages tool. It actually has a broad range of economic benefits that it explores. And as part of this tool, this is phase two of building it statewide. Stakeholder engagement has really been an essential part of the process, and Annie's going to walk you through that in a minute. And the way we got there was at first we created a tool just for Southeast Florida. So again, working with the South Florida Regional Planning Council, we built a tool that was designed for that area. And now we are expanding it statewide. And as Annie walks you through the tool, you'll see those places where the statewide expansion helps, right? And there's specific metrics that are, there are specific metrics that are assigned to each region to give you a little bit better geographic information, because obviously what happens in Southeast Florida isn't quite the same economically that might happen in the Panhandle. And one of the things Annie will talk you through stakeholder engagement is how important feedback was, and we actually changed how we did the community scorecard so that we could make it more useful for local governments looking at state grants. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Annie to talk about stakeholder engagement and walk you all through the tool.
Thanks, Alec. And thanks so much for everyone joining today. As Alec mentioned, engagement has been critical for making the tool evolve, and we want to continue to work on it and make sure it's helpful for you all. So feedback in the past was provided both from the public and private sector to help us improve the user experience, to help us refine the cost inputs and expand what benefits we looked at. We got feedback on the outputs that the tool looks at, and some of the formatting and importance of certain metrics that people wanted to see. And as Alec mentioned, we also talked more about how to integrate this with existing state priorities in alignment with certain DEP evaluation criteria. I'll just go through some specific examples of feedback we have received and how we implemented it to generate ideas on sort of the level of detail of what we're looking for as we go into this next round of feedback to enhance the tool. So in the past, we were asked to evaluate more complex and hybrid designs. And so we incorporated more infrastructure solutions into the costing database that Alec mentioned that I'll show in a moment. We were asked to vary the inputs for the economic analysis based on local geographic conditions. And so we did add regional adjustment factors for building value costs. We were asked to look at a wider range of the structure types that would be protected by potential project. So we added in some more prototypes. We were asked to look at additional benefits. We were also asked to think about alignment with grant funding. And so as Alec mentioned again, we did align the Resilient Florida grant evaluation criteria with our community scorecard. So these are just some examples and importance of continuing conversations and feedback as we continue to go through phase two. We want to make sure that we're creating something that's aligned with organizational goals and priorities and funding requirements that allows for user customizability, but also maintains that consistency. And then something that's easy to use. We don't want too much economic jargon. We don't want burdensome processes for users, and we want to minimize rework. So with that, we are asking for users to test the tool and provide us feedback. And we've bucketed it into two categories of users. We have regular test users who are asking a pretty low level of effort to run one project through real or hypothetical through the tool and give us feedback on usability, clarity, if you think it's applicable and helpful or not, and any feedback you have. And then super test users who may be people that really like Excel or are running a lot of benefit cost analysis or just have interest and curiosity. We would love for some of people to spend more time going through the tool and testing multiple projects, trying out different default overrides, comparing outcomes. If you find an error, we're all for hearing that. Everything's in draft phase currently. And so as was mentioned, we're going to host office hours starting the week of March 19th to basically be an opportunity for people to ask questions as they're going through the tool or provide feedback. And then if you're like a super test user, as an example, and you have more feedback, we're happy to do a one-on-one. We are going to provide specific questions that we are looking for feedback on that we'll go over on this call today. And then we will also be sending a follow-up email to everyone here on if you would have interest in being a regular test user, if you would have interest in being a super test user, and all of the links that are relevant to that user testing. So keep that in mind as we go through the tool, which I will do now, and I will share my screen. Can I get a verbal confirmation that you can see my screen?
Good to go.
Yep.
Great. So this is the Resilient Infrastructure Benefit Cost Analysis Tool introduction page. It gives information on the purpose of the tool, its key features, and how the tool is organized. We go over the costing database at a high level, which we'll go into more detail on today. And then some pretty important fundamental concepts. So the tool is looking at largely, we're focused on flood mitigation projects. We have discussed expanding this to other hazards like heat and wind was just brought up on another.
A little bit more.
Zoom in more.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Wind was another hazard that was brought up on a recent call that we just had this week, which is an interesting one to bring up. But right now, the whole model is really focused on flood mitigation. And what it does is it looks at what the damages are under baseline conditions before you do any mitigation, and what the damages are after mitigation, and then monetizes those benefits. The user still does need some information in order to have the tool work. So you do need to know what the flooding is before the project and what the flooding is after the project. And then the tool helps to assign monetized value to those. We'll go into more specifics on that, but those are some fundamentally important items, is that the tool is looking at flood mitigation projects and that you look at before and after as a way to understand the benefit. Recurrence interval is the average time between flooding events is based on the probability that that event will occur in a given year. So if you may hear of a 10-year storm or a 50-year storm, the tool allows you to capture the different storm event types that the project may offer protection from. And it also allows you to look at that storm event under current conditions as well as under future conditions. So you may know what the 10-year storm flooding is today, and then you also might know what the 10-year flooding is in 2070, and the tool allows you to account for both of those flood conditions within the benefit cost analysis. Benefit cost ratio is an important concept. It means if you have a benefit cost ratio over 1, it means benefits outweigh costs, and the project can be considered cost effective. The presentation of results, we generate a number of metrics from the tool on the benefits that the project offers, and they fall under these categories. So we look at avoided structure damages, avoided content damages, so that's like furniture within your home. We look at avoided debris costs, avoided displacement, and avoided disruption to businesses. So if a business needs to close as a result of their building being flooding, we're capturing that loss. If applicable, we look at avoided auto loss damages, avoided street flooding damages, and travel time delays. We're capturing avoided emergency response damages. So if an emergency vehicle now has to take longer to get to their destination, we're capturing the cost of that delay in providing care. The tool is able to look at avoided utility damages. It's able to also capture recreation value. So if your project is adding park space, for example, the tool will give you a monetized benefit for that additional park space. There are certain inputs that the user needs to put in order for that feature to function. Green infrastructure, if your project has a green infrastructure component to it, so if it's adding bioretention, for example, you can put in the acreage for that and it will generate an ecosystem service value for that green infrastructure component. And for this value, we are relying on FEMA ecosystem service values that were created, last updated in around 2022. Previously, they were embedded also in the BCA toolkit under FEMA. The more recent iterations have excluded it. Regional economic impact. So from the investment in construction and then from the operation and maintenance costs, we're able to look at what that converts to from a jobs perspective. And so for projects, we are able to evaluate the both direct on-site jobs as well as the indirect and induced jobs. And then lastly, we have this qualitative assessment. So this is not assigning a monetized variable or a job quantitative number, but it's bringing in some really important criteria informed by the Resilient Florida program on other considerations that you would want to account for to help evaluate the project. And we'll go through those in more detail. This section is just getting into the tool conditions and limitations. As Alec mentioned, this is not meant to replace a BCA that may be a requirement for a certain funding program, because every funding source has their own BCA requirements that you must follow in order to be qualified. But it is meant to be a sketch planning tool. It's meant to help you evaluate early on between project alternatives, maybe think through a different type of way to approach a project that may have more benefits than you were thinking about previously. And one other note, generally on benefit cost analysis, there are limitations of BCA. No matter what, you need to have some level of data on the project and benefits and the hazard risk reduction. You need to also recognize that BCA does try to monetize variables, and it's possible not every benefit is one that should be monetized or has a methodology to monetize. And so BCA is just one form of evaluating a project, and it is not the end all be all. I'm going to go to the project outputs tab. This is where you can see all of the results from the modeling that you're conducting. And I'm seeing some questions come through in the chat, and I will answer those after we go through it. So this is showing the direct and indirect jobs, the jobs from the construction period and the operations period, that community resilience scorecard score. And then these are the benefits and costs in net present value terms, and then what the benefit cost ratio is. So I've just put in a dummy project, and you can see it's got a BCR of almost 2, so my benefits are outweighing my costs. And you can see down here what's driving the benefits. So I have my structure damage benefits and my content damage benefits, and each of the categories down here. And then I break out the costs down here between construction and O&M. If we go into this general users inputs tab, this is what the user needs to fill out in order for the tool to function. They go through a series of drop downs on benefit categories that may or may not relate to the project. So for example, in my dummy project, I'm saying that the project will provide benefits to building structures. So I'm putting yes here. I'm saying the building will provide benefits to streets that's going to reduce street flooding. So I'm putting yes here. If your project results in a protection to utility service provision, you can link that here and you can get at the monetized benefit of decreasing an outage for customers. And then similarly, the project I'm going to model has a green infrastructure component. So I'm putting yes here. I'm saying there's no recreation component. I would like to look at the future values under 2070 conditions in addition to current conditions. So I have plugged that in. It's going to be a hybrid because I am going to have some bioretention in my project in addition to gray infrastructure. So those are some drop downs I've filled out. And then this section is on just overall general assumptions and project cost assumptions. You can overwrite any of the defaults in the model, but the model also provides some defaults for you if you're not sure. So for example, for the discount rate, FEMA guidance right now is using 7%, so our default for the tool is at 7%, but the user can override that to 3% or what they would like to use. Similarly, for project useful life, we have defaults, dollar year, we have defaults, etc. The user does need to put in the construction start year and duration. And then down here, we have these cost components. You may have what your CapEx and OpEx might be. You may just have your CapEx, and then we provide an estimate of what O&M would be as a percentage of CapEx based on the project type. Or you may want to look at our project cost database to inform what your costs will be for the project. These are very high level, low and high end ranges on a unit cost basis for different categories of infrastructure solution that are common within the flood mitigation space. So we have backflow preventers, we have detention ponds, we have flood walls, we have outfalls, we have riprap preventments, we have road raising. There's a number of different options that people can choose from, and as long as you have a sense of how many linear feet or acreage you're putting in, you can start to generate a high level estimate of the low and high end costs here. This is one piece that a lot of people have demonstrated interest in, and it's something that we want to continue to think through how it can add value. Right now, this has been built based on just past projects that the consulting team has worked on, as well as proprietary data sources on cost estimate guides. One thing that was brought up in past feedback sessions was, is there an opportunity for this to live somewhere like on a website that people could actually crowdsource and put in project costs that they've incurred for recent projects, and that this could become a more robust database over time for resilience costing. It's something that we're really intrigued by and are thinking about for a future phase, but is not including that within our current phase of work. If I keep going down the list here, some other user inputs include what location you are in. As I mentioned before, we're trying to regionalize costs based on the site of the project. So this is where you can do that regionalization. We have these building values. So if there's structure that is going to be flooded without the project and is not flooded with the project, the damage to that structure depends on how much it costs to reconstruct that building. And so this is the typical default costs per square foot for that reconstruction. The user can overwrite any of these, but these are defaults provided that vary by building type and county. Down here, we have these sections grayed out because I said utility benefits were not applicable to my hypothetical project. If it were applicable, there would be things to fill out here. And then this is the fact that my project is offering protection against flooding at roadways. These are now inputs I need to put in. And I'm just going to walk through the way that this is organized. It's showing at the top the 10-year storm event under a no project scenario is what I would put my inputs here. And then with the project, what is the flooding under current conditions? And I'm doing that for the 10-year event, the 50-year event, and the 100-year event. I'm also doing it for future flood conditions. So I clicked above 2070 as my future condition year. And so I'm saying actually under 2070 conditions, I am also interested in what the damages are under baseline conditions for a 10-year storm, and what a 10-year storm under 2070 conditions is with the project. And so this is just additional inputs based on that. This is grayed out because I said no utility impacts. I said it was a hybrid project with green infrastructure benefits, and I mentioned I'm going to put in bioretention. And so I am putting, this is going to be 1.3 acres of bioretention, and so I'm putting in that acreage for the ecosystem service value to be generated. If I had said yes to recreation, this is what I filled out for recreation. This is one of the more burdensome criteria, I would say. So we do have more guidance on and instructions on how to fill this one out. This is driven by Army Corps methodology on how they evaluate recreation. There's one more monetization user inputs tab, and this is to continue continue the assessment on structure damage and content damage, as well as business loss and displacement. So this is where you need to put in a little bit more information about the structures in your project area. I'm going to just say my project area has some single family homes, and it also has some commercial buildings. And I have different flooding at each of these with and without the project. So for a number of single family homes, about 20, almost 30 single family homes under a 10-year event, they're having no flooding without the project. But starting at a 50-year event, they're having a foot of flooding. And then for 100 single family homes, they're having no flooding under the 10-year event. They're having no flooding under the 50-year event, but at the 100-year event, they're starting to have a foot of flooding. So I'm organizing the buildings based on what a level of flooding they're anticipated to have under current and project conditions. And these flood depths are then what's generating the monetized protection offered to each of the buildings. There are default assumptions on size. You can overwrite any of those. So like the default assumption for a commercial building is 19,000 square feet, but that's way too big for my neighborhood. So I'm saying they're actually at 7,000 square feet. You can override also the type of business in there. So I'm saying I have some professional technical service businesses, and I also have some retail trade. And so that affects what I'm looking at from a business disruption perspective. There's another, and then I can override any annual sales information if I have better sales information, etc. So those are the inputs needed for that structure dependent analysis. The last tab I will go over is just this resilience scorecard. As Alec mentioned, and as I mentioned previously, the evaluation criteria in here are set up to align with the Resilient Florida program. So they are hopefully aligned in terms of priority criteria. And then what you go down here is you rate on a qualitative basis of limited or indirect, clear or moderate, strong or direct in terms of how different questions are answered. So, for example, to what extent does the project reduce or avoid risks to assets or systems with regional or statewide importance? And this is something that really does not lend itself well to monetization. It's definitely a somewhat subjective evaluation. You are able to then put this user rating decision down here, and there's a number of others. How ready is the project to proceed efficiently and on schedule? How effectively does the project target areas where vulnerable critical assets are most concentrated? So a number of different questions you go through, and it gives you this total score. All of what I just showed you is to evaluate one project. If you want to have different types of projects that you're evaluating, you would fill this out per project. And then to compare them, we're going to use, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share a different screen. We're going to use this project alternative comparison. So I just ran my bioswale hybrid green-gray infrastructure project. I got my benefit cost ratio at 2, but I've also run a gray infrastructure-based project that just has some exfiltration trenches. And that project is more expensive. It's going to be 20 million instead of 13 million. It has a little bit fewer benefits, 23 instead of 26. It has a lower benefit cost ratio of a 1.2. It also has a lower community resilience scorecard score. So this is seeing everything quantified, and then I can also see it in visualization. And again, this is currently living in Excel. We're thinking through how this would live in an online data interactive dashboard in some way. But you can compare up to 10 projects in here and look at your benefit cost ratio versus your community score, etc. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing if the presentation could be brought back up, and I will start to go through questions in the chat. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
Do
Are
you
there-
want to go to the next slide and we'll just start to go through these questions and then I'll do a few of them. I'll pass it to you, Alec, and then whatever we have time for at the end, we can keep going.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does the tool allow for cost, loss, nuances based on LMI census tracts for disadvantaged communities? It currently does not account for low, medium income census tracts for DCs. It's a very interesting question on how to incorporate that. I think you could do something to the effect of bringing that in from a census data point on how many DCs are captured by protection in your project base. If you are comparing two projects in the same area, it would change too much, but it's an interesting idea and I really appreciate that question and I think it's something we will definitely take note to think about for future iteration.
But Annie, I think if we're looking at, I guess, an infrastructure project and you're comparing different types of projects for one particular solution, you would just kind of need to know whether it's in an LMI area. But I think that's a really good point across different entities. I think that's where the community scorecard can also come in, is that in the quantitative analysis, it does look at a couple different things. We shifted it more towards looking at the Resilient Florida scoring, but we did have a previous version that looked more at community-based concepts, and that is something that could be adjusted as well, whether you want to add additional components to the community scorecard maybe over time. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, I like that. Unit costs of different project components will be very valuable for future reference. To make it publicly available and crowdsourced would require some good QC to be most valuable. I think that's a very important point.
Alan is speaking, you are speaking my language. We have talked about this a lot, about how we can potentially crowdsource infrastructure costs and projects to help local governments refine different numbers over time. And I think that is an important part of this tool, is kind of the costing aspect. And we've had lots of conversations on it. So it's great to hear that you're interested in that.
Yeah, thank you. The next two questions are actually somewhat related. So the first is, does the 2070 function reflect projected sea level rise in the location? And the next question is, where do the flood depth reduction numbers come from? You have to know that before using the tool. Yes, so the user needs to know the flood information before and after the project. The tool is not doing the flood depth for you. The tool is only taking those flood depths and assigning monetization to the values. So the 2070 function is saying, if you know what the 2070 conditions are with projected sea level rise, the tool can account for that. But the user must be the one that understands ahead of time before using the tool what the flooded conditions are. We will have guidance in the user guide on ideas for how to do that. It does not need to be as extensive as doing H&H modeling for all of these projects. But the tool itself is not doing that piece of the analysis. That's the legwork that's required prior to conducting the tool.
Yeah.
Is flooding, go ahead.
I just want to, and I think that it's important to note that one thing we will be also providing kind of a must have, nice to have, really great to have portion documentation that's going to explain to your consultants what information you would need on a particular project in order to use the tool. So the idea is that you all, as the potential end user, may have a consultant examine different infrastructure projects, say as part of like a stormwater master plan potentially, and that they could then give you the data needed to enter it into this tool, or they could use the tool themselves. But as Annie also mentioned, we're going to provide some guidance on how you might want to calculate that to do just kind of a rough order of magnitude on flood reduction for different infrastructure projects.
Yeah. The next question, is flooding the only impact hazard that is considered? Yes, the tool is very much focused on flood mitigation projects to date. It has been brought up, as I mentioned earlier, that other hazards are of interest like heat or wind. That's not currently embedded in the tool, but something we are discussing for future phase. And if you have other thoughts on that, please, we would be interested in hearing how you may want to use the tool for other hazards. A suggestion to add fire stations to building types, and then there's some comments on critical infrastructure should be a separate building type, and this is something that was also brought up before, and that we added police stations and schools as a result of that feedback. I think we can certainly add fire. Critical infrastructure would not be something we could add as a building type, only in that that encompasses too many different categories, but we could certainly add fire. We could think about if there's an option to add something like a wastewater treatment plant. I'm not sure if we have that data available to us, but something I would like us to look into. So yeah, go ahead.
I was like, maybe there's a way we could do like specialized building type where folks could, and we could give some general pricing per square foot, but then folks might need to provide some additional data depending on the infrastructure type to allow like a little more customization if there's a specific infrastructure type they're looking at. Because I don't think we'll be able to give every infrastructure type possible.
Yeah, and that's interesting. There's some, so the assumptions that you would kind of need to develop around this are just the replacement cost for that, but then also if there are the way that the monetization of the benefits happens is highly reliant on depth damage functions, which correlate the flood depth with the amount of damage to be expected in the building. And those depth damage functions have pre-determined building types. We can think about how the alignment happens, but that's just some more context there on what those building types are used for. How long would it take for an employee to evaluate a single project using this tool? This is a really good question. Something that we're going to be asking users to track as they test. It depends on how much data you have available to you to begin with. If you already have information on acreage of the green infrastructure or on the amount of hours that the road will be closed and what the detour is, or on the flood depths at the buildings, if you have that information already, actually filling out the tool is very, very quick. I would say it's about 10 to 15 minutes. The level of effort is largely on collecting that data that you need to fill out the tool. And that I think can range depending on the project type and also depending on how much you regularly use that level, that type of data and are comfortable with it. So it's variable and something that we want to get a better grasp of as people do testing. And so we will hopefully get to ask you how available the data is that you need to put into the tool and how long it's taking you to collect that data. Does the tool provide, oh, you know what? It's 1:50. I'm going to press pause and then Alec, let's finish okay.
Absolutely. So just want to give you guys some housekeeping. So the questions we're going to be asking you to think about as you use the tool or did the supporting material, so the user guide, the video demonstration, clearly explain how to use the tool. Was anything confusing or lacking detail? Should there be more tool tips throughout to supplement the guides? There are existing tool tips in the tool. If there's an area that might be confusing as you use it, hey, that would be a good place to add a tool tip. Generally, was the structure of the tool easy to navigate and follow? Was the workflow intuitive? What important features or capabilities are missing that would make the tool valuable for you? Then in terms of cost and benefit, are the default values in the tool representative accurate for region? If something sets off your spidey senses, it's good for us to know that. Are there additional structure prototypes that could be incorporated? We got feedback today about fire stations. That's super helpful to know what folks are really looking at so we can build it out. And maybe it may not be in this iteration, but we can definitely look at it for future iterations of the tool. Are there additional infrastructure solutions that should be included in the cost database? As Alan talked about, our dream would be to crowdsource this, QA, QC it, and really create a living document, a living database over time of costs. In terms of outputs, are the presentation of the outputs clear? Are there metrics or outputs useful for supporting decisions? Are there any other economic metrics that you'd like to see incorporated in the tool? And what visualization graphs would be useful to you in the dashboard? So in terms of feedback, what we're going to do is we're going to host office hours. We have 3 of them set. And before I go into that, just we'll send you this slide deck. You'll have a link to the video demonstration and tool in the slide deck. You also got it as part of the registration email, the reminder email, and we'll send it to you as part of the follow-up email as well. And so you'll be able to register for office hours. We have 3 different hours scheduled where you'll be able to ask Annie any questions you could possibly want. And those are March 19th at 10 a.m., March 26th at 2 p.m., or March 30th at 9 a.m. Those are virtual. And we're looking again to have feedback by April 3rd. So in terms of contacting us, you're welcome to contact Annie, myself, or Randy, and we will happily get back to you. And then I also would like to share the contact information for our regional planning council partners. They are wonderful resources for your region and are always there to be of help and support as you think through resilience projects. And so with that, I know we still have a lot of questions left, and so I'm going to pass it back to Annie, and she can start going through some more questions.
Okay. Does the tool provide impacts to agriculture? This is such a good question. The answer is no, but I really, really like the question, and I would love us to think about that. I don't know if we can commit to it being in this iteration of the tool, but definitely documenting that one for future metric. Is there a compare and contrast feature in this tool? For example, if I want to evaluate the cost of green infrastructure versus gray infrastructure solutions for a particular problem, would I have to run both independently? I'm going to share my screen again and say that there's a little bit of a nuanced answer to that. So if you want to run the full benefit cost analysis between a green infrastructure versus a gray infrastructure project, then yes, you would have to run both independently as like an independent Excel file, and you would have to compare your benefits and costs once you get to this alternative comparison file. However, if you just want to compare, can you see my screen okay on the costing database?
Yes.
Okay. If you just want to compare green versus gray costs from a linear foot perspective, and you're just focused on costs, not on benefits, you could conceivably live in this tab instead of working on the other tabs and looking at, okay, if I'm actually going to do a living shoreline instead of a seawall, and run your cost comparisons in here. And that is a slightly faster process than running the full tool for a full BCA between those 2 solution types. Given the various options, such as time horizons and project types, and recognizing that the BCR only tells part of the story, how does the tool promote equal comparison of flood mitigation projects when one may protect a wastewater treatment plant, for example? Go ahead.
So I think, Jason, obviously, a BCA is one of the components of the decision-making process. This is really great if you're looking at multiple different project types to solve one problem. Obviously, if you're looking across a portfolio of potential projects and one of them protects a critical asset like a wastewater treatment plant, there, and Annie can talk about some of the ways that the tool does that, but obviously that should be flagged as part of a kind of a broader CIP project for protecting critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the tool would ever try to do equal comparison of different projects when one might protect a wastewater treatment plant and one doesn't. I think that's kind of a different. I think in a way that's thinking about like prioritization of different types of projects rather than deciding alternatives of one project.
And this is
Yeah,
supposed to be a screening level tool, not something that would replace like engineering assessments over time.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. I wasn't sure if, given the interest to look at this as a statewide tool, if it would potentially or was planned to be used by the state for the purpose of prioritizing state investment, in which
No.
case that was the basis of my question.
Yeah. And I
see.
appreciate that. I think we're more interested in kind of the cost effectiveness of a particular, like solving one particular area than the cross comparison of projects from like a
Understood. Thank you.
state use perspective. Yeah.
It's a really good question in terms of when we do introduce the tool and the use types for it. I think we probably need to be more explicit that this isn't, I like the question a lot, that this is not meant to be the way that the state, prioritizes all projects. That's a very good question and something I think we can be clearer about the use for it. So I'm just taking notes as we go. Thank you for the question. Great info, read the SLR factors. If we are going to be doing that calc on our end, does everyone have to land on the same RCP forcing levels that we are consistent across the geographic board, apples to apples? I think this also goes back to the point we're just talking about. It is meant to look at the local scale. So it's not meant to say between RCPs or between very broad regions what project to pick. It's meant to say within your local geographic focus, how are you looking at different projects that you're thinking about? So I don't think it requires forcing everyone to be consistent across the board on how you're looking at sea level rise projections.
And I just want to point out, like, we are building a tool right now. Obviously, this is DEP funded. DEP has not made any determinations on using the tool. We're just right now building it and determining uses for it. Ideally, right, the Florida Flood Hub is building standardized inundation models that may be able to be used by local governments in the future. We're not trying to make any policy decisions by this tool. We're just trying to create a tool in the toolbox for local governments.
A tool in the toolbox. That's exactly it. I like it. This is an interesting line of discussion. So this is going back to the building type discussion. When we start peeling out more layers on building type, are we really talking about building type or use case studies? No, we're not talking about use case studies. We are really talking about building type. So what we mean is if your project is protecting 20 single family homes and your project is protecting 10 commercial buildings, those are the building types that we're talking about. And we want to make sure we're assigning the right assumptions on the cost of construction for a single family home and the cost of construction for a commercial building type. I'm cognizant of the fact that we only have 1 minute
Annie,
left.
actually, you hit all the questions. All the other questions were logistics. And so
Okay.
you actually answered all the questions in the chat. It is 2:59. We want to be cognizant of that. And so again, thank you to the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council and Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council for being our host today. And if there's anything else you need, please do not hesitate to reach out to the team. We are here. We look forward to you reviewing the tool and look forward to seeing you at office hours.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.